What's up, old school homies? Let's go further into largemouth bass fishing, and I want to talk to you guys about it as a life cycle in the lake because a lot of people don't understand that the bass doesn't need to be stocked in the lake. Once it gets in the lake, it's fine. It goes into a life cycle with the other fish in the lake. So I'm not going to tell you every single thing that happens in the lake because that's the whole romance of fishing, is knowing what's going on underneath the water so that you can adapt to the situation. Usually just break it down by the 4 seasons, and from there what patterns you can follow by the conditions in front of you. But that's just a general outline of how you would catch bass. They go through different life cycles. They spawn, they start out as small fish. A lot of the small fish starve because they can't catch enough other smaller fish to eat. They mostly eat shad, which are a very small silverfish about this big to this big, and once they start getting bigger, the shads are too hard for them to catch unless you're a really good bigger bass. So that's really what happens to the fish underneath the water, is competing against other fish. And mostly for shad. Some lakes do have crayfish. Some of the bass eat crappie for a certain amount of time, that while they're around, and bluegill. These are just basically smaller fish than the bass, but getting closer to the bass's size. So I've caught fish that have eaten baby carps, like little tiny carp fish. They'll eat anything that moves, basically, and they try to feed themselves. As a result, the fish grow in different shapes, and this is a really interesting point. If they're coming up behind a rock all the time and just snatching some prey, they grow into really short, fat shapes. If they have to chase a fish down in the middle of the ocean or the lake, then they grow longer and skinnier so that they can go faster for longer distances. So it's weird when you catch one out in open water. It's not going to look like one that you caught from behind a rock. Sometimes you catch one from behind a rock and it's just this big fat bully, and then you catch one out in the middle of the water and it's this big long glorious fish. And it's depending on how you fish as to which fish you will catch. But the bass are going to attack everything. They're pretty much at the top of the food chain, and the reason why they never really got all the way to the West Coast was we had a competitor for the bass, and it was called the garpike. The garfish, or garpike, was a longer and more predatory fish than the bass. I think it even had teeth. These things are crazy. If you check it out on River Monsters, the guy went down to South America and started catching some just to show us that we did have these in the United States, and we basically eliminated them so that we could have this bass fishing sport. A garfish could probably eat 5 bass in a day, so you're kind of killing the sport if you have one fish out competing the fish that you're trying to catch. You know what I mean? So now on the West Coast, it's pretty much the bass that rules the lake. There are larger fish, like the carp. The carp in my lake can get up to 40 pounds, but they're not a predatory fish. It's a vegetarian.